What up, Vibers? It's your boy Kai. Listen, if you've ever asked yourself, what's the point of all of this, or how do I make sure that my life actually means something, then this podcast episode is for you. Because today I'm speaking with a man who has helped thousands of people answer those exact questions. His name is Rabbi Daniel Cohen. He is a speaker, he's an author, he's a mentor, he's an all around light bringer. And he spent the last few decades guiding people to live lives of legacy. Not later, not eventually, but right now. In this episode today, we talk about the books that he's written, the power of small acts of kindness, and what it means to reverse engineer your life so that you're remembered the way that you actually want to be remembered. And y'all, this episode, it got me thinking about my own legacy, especially as somebody that has been through some heavy stuff in their life. ADHD, depression, anxiety, loss, all of it. And somehow, Rabbi Cohen just makes it feel doable. Not overwhelming, not preachy, just real. Before we start the episode today, do me a favor. Number one, hit that like button. Number two, make sure you subscribe to this podcast if you're not already part of the Vibe with Kai family. And number three, if this episode speaks to you even just a little bit, drop a comment, leave a review. I read every single comment, I read every single review, and it helps more people find podcasts like this. All right, y'all, that's enough talking from me. Today, let's get ready to feel seen, feel grounded, and maybe even feel inspired to start living with a little more purpose. With that said, enjoy the episode. I want to welcome our guest today, Rabbi Daniel Cohen. Hello. How are
Hello,
you?
how are you?
I'm
Thank you very
good.
much. I appreciate that warm introduction. I felt the
Yeah.
vibe.
That's the goal, man. That's the goal.
I know.
Super excited to be sitting and chatting with you. So let's start right from the top here. Rabbi, for those of the people that are listening or watching right now that are meeting you for the very first time, how would you describe your life's mission?
My life's mission is to be fully cognizant that, God brings me into the world every day
Mm-hmm.
to accomplish something unique that's different than any other human being in the universe. It's not only me, it's every single person here has something unique to contribute. And really the opportunity that we have every day is to do our best to optimize the divine potential that
Mm-hmm.
God breathes into us every day, and then be a conduit for sharing God's light in every encounter that I have, and with the sense that I'm living a life that is soul driven, not body driven. The
Mm-hmm.
mystics explain that the body is compared to the horse and the soul is compared to the jockey. And the question is, who's leading who?
Mm,
Jockey leading the horse, or is the horse leading the jockey? And I try to live a way and inspire others to say, look, fortify your soul, because when you do that and your body is driven by your soul, your life is filled with so much more deep happiness, authentic pleasure, meaning, and joy.
it's so profound. I love the way that you phrase all that, and you've spent decades having this ideology, having this knowledge about you, having this insight, and you chose to lead your life like this. You spent decades helping people live with legacy in mind. But I'm curious, was there a specific moment or a turning point for you personally that made you say, you know what, this is the work that I'm meant to do?
So I would say, I always grew up. My father, he should live me well. My mom, of blessed memory, were always people that led lives of purpose. My mother, of
Mm,
blessed memory, would always, when you asked her how she was doing, she'd say, "Thank God, fantastic, very grateful." Helping me realize that life has meaning. But unfortunately, it really hit me. My mom passed away from a brain aneurysm
mm-hmm,
suddenly when she was 44 years old. I was vacationing down in Florida with my mom's parents without a care in the world. And then within 48 hours, my mom passed away. My life was turned upside down, and I realized that life can change in an instant. But then when I got to the same age as my mother, I always knew that she was young. But when I got to 44, that's when I began asking myself, am I doing the most that I can with the life that God has given me? And I
mm-hmm.
actually began to look through eulogies. Like, what does it mean to lead
Yeah.
a life of legacy? And what emerged from it was I wanted to help people develop a strategy not to live life from crisis to crisis. The premise of the book that I wrote is that you're at a funeral, and as you walk out of the funeral, you have a moment when you say to yourself, I hope they speak about me.
Mm,
the way they spoke about other individuals. And the truth is for 15 minutes, we're all motivated. But then we go back to life as usual until the next awakening happens.
Hmm.
So that awakening that I had at 44 helped me focus on how can I help people identify what is the best version of yourself, the life you want to lead. And then I take people on a journey of 7 principles to reverse engineer our lives so we lead the lives now for how we want to be remembered.
I'm glad you brought up your mother's passing, because I know that that deeply shaped your path, and you were saying how this shift for you happened when you were 44. And I love talking to people like you, because I think that sometimes when people reach their 30s, 40s, 50s, they think that there's no chance for them to change their life or to lead a better life. Like, it's like I've lived for this long. This is just how I am. This is just who I am. That can't that can't change. But you are living proof that that is true. What would you say to the people right now that are listening, that are in their 40s, that haven't had that experience that you have had yet? What would you say to them right now?
I would say to them, I share a story often these days, which is a story of a 94-year-old man who was suffering from COVID in Italy in
Hmm.
2020. And he was on the ventilator for a few months. And then on his way out of the hospital, he was given the ventilator bill for one day and he started to cry. And the doctor said to him, "Are you crying because you can't pay the bill for a ventilator for one day?" And he said, "I can pay the bill, but I've been breathing God's air for free for 94 years.
Mm,
And now I know how much one day's breath is worth." See, sometimes we may not believe we can change, but when you wake up in the morning, take a deep breath and say, God believes in me. He believes that even though my life may have been on one trajectory, he knows that I have something to actually accomplish. So every day is really God's way of saying, as much as you may believe in God, never forget that God believes in you.
mhm,
And if you take a step just to bring a little bit more light into your life or somebody else's life, God will then be the wind beneath your wings. It
mhm,
says in the book of Isaiah, chapter 40, those who have faith in God, their strength will be renewed. They will grow wings like eagles. They will run and not walk. And I found that if somebody makes one or two small changes, literally it reinvigorates their soul and they now are on a whole different trajectory.
mhm. You brought up your writing not too long ago, and I want to talk about your book. What will they say about you when you're gone? Uh, I love that title. I love that, and like it's obviously alluded to from the story that you were talking about, earlier. Can you go into a little bit detail of what does it mean to reverse engineer your life? What does that mean exactly?
So what it means is it's actually interesting. The concept itself of the strategy, I was talking to a business person about it as a friend. And, if at the end of the day, let's say I'm at that funeral,
Hmm.
and one of the things that they talk about is that he was a person that always looked to do kind things for people. He
Hmm.
was a person you could always count on. Okay. So I can walk out of that funeral and say, you know what? That's amazing what they said. What does it mean to reverse engineer your life? It means to work every day to be a person who ignites acts of kindness in the world without expectation of anything in return. It's to
Hmm.
basically say, if this is my goal, I want to be remembered as a person. And there's a beautiful idea in Solomon's Ecclesiastes, which is this: every human being is born with their hands clenched, a baby. When somebody dies, their hands open up. All of life is about learning to take your closed fists and allow all your blessings to pass through. Great gift. It's not
Hmm.
about ego, it's about service of others. So I think
Hmm.
most human beings would say that's a great life. Reverse engineering it is helping people have the strategies to actually implement that in their life. And part of it is about, I would say, like, a mind shift. And one of the in this particular realm, one of the important ideas that I share with people is called discover your Elijah moment. Now I
Mm.
gotta ask you a question. Have you ever met Elijah before? He's,
I
Elijah,
no.
holy man. He's a holy man. So there was once actually a young man who goes to a mystic and says, "I want to see Elijah the prophet." So the mystic says to him, "If you want to see Elijah, go into the forest. There's a widow there with children. Bring food for the weekend, for the Sabbath, and you'll see Elijah the prophet." So he goes there the whole weekend. He doesn't see Elijah, and he goes back to the mystic and said, "You promised I'd see Elijah." He says, "Take the food again, go back into the forest. You'll see Elijah." It's Friday afternoon. He's deep in the forest. He's within earshot of the home of the widow. And he hears a child crying out to the mother, saying, "Mommy, where are we going to get food from for this Sabbath?" And she turns to the child and says, "Just like Elijah came last week, Elijah's going to come again." And he realized that in that moment, he was the Elijah that this woman was waiting for. Discovering your Elijah moment means creating an awareness that I'm not tasked with changing the world,
Mhm,
but no encounter is random. And if I can enable a person to leave my orbit feeling better about themselves than when they entered my orbit, I've now left an indelible imprint on somebody's life. So
mhm,
when you talk about reverse engineering, I'll give you another example. I mean, I was recently talking to a member of my synagogue who recovered from cancer at Sloan Kettering, a great hospital. And I said to him, "Tell me what you loved about Sloan Kettering." And you would think he would talk about, great doctors and
mhm,
nurses. And he said, "You know what I loved about Sloan Kettering? The doorman." Was when I
mm,
walked out of Sloan Kettering, the doorman said to me, "I'm praying for you, and I hope I never see you again." So here's a man who created a legacy simply by sharing a few words and opening a door. And when you live with that mindset, don't wait till, God forbid, you can't do it, but everybody has the power to smile. Everybody has the power to share a kind word with the cashier, or if you see somebody who needs a little bit of help, if you're the person that that individual needs most at that moment, you've now brought a little bit of light into that person's life. And then you actually become intuitive about creating those moments.
mhm. I think more people my age need to hear that. Because it's so I'm 38, and it's really easy to overlook those small things like what the doorman was just talking about. I feel like it's so easy to overlook those things because we're always looking, far off in the distance, and we're not, even appreciating the small little things along the way in our journey. And I feel like sometimes people my age, we feel stuck right between surviving and thriving. So when we have bills and stress and brain fog and all this stuff that's kind of happening in and around our lives, how can we go about living a life of legacy when we're easily distracted and it's so easy for us to get lost in that? How do we live a life of legacy?
So I'll give you a 3-minute strategy.
Yeah.
I would imagine that most people who are listening can spare 3 minutes a
Yes,
day.
I think they
You
can.
know,
Yes.
I
I
think
think
they
they
can
can
really,
make it work.
nobody doesn't have 3 minutes. To
Yes.
me, this is what I call a 3-minute supercharge to a life of legacy. Okay. So you got 3 minutes. The first minute, offer a prayer. Okay. Just choose a verse. Okay. Pray to God for strength. For me, it was Isaiah 40. That's your 1 minute. Okay. The second minute is you start a gratitude journal. And every day you write down something you're grateful for. But here's the challenge: never repeat yourself,
Mm,
because that forces you to find new things. I learned this from my daughter, who, when I learned about it, she was up to about 800 of these. Okay. And she said to me, "I write a new thing every day. And every night before I go to sleep, I read 50 of them. How can I not be grateful?" That's minute number 2. Minute number 3 is lift up somebody's life. Send a text, send an email, make a phone call. And here I suggest, on a Sunday, when you're reading the newspaper or whatever, put down a list of people in your life who either, are sick, people who did kindnesses for you. Maybe it's a teacher, maybe it's a relative. That's your list. And then every day go to one of those people and say, "I'm thinking about you. I'm saying a prayer for you. How can I help you? I know your son or daughter's looking for a job. Maybe I can network for them." So in 3 minutes, no matter what you do the rest of the day, it actually will feed your confidence in knowing that it's not the time that's controlling me, but I actually can do something. Because legacy is not built in buildings, it's not built in giving a lot of money. It's built literally in taking a little bit of my light, my talent, my time, and just being there for somebody. And I think and then your soul will be lifted. Gradually you'll realize that I can do this in more than 3 minutes. You just
Yeah.
become more focused on seeing the world, not for and this I think about this a lot. A great mystic once said, "Do not lament the darkness, increase the light." A lot of
Mm,
people are always thinking about what the problems are in the world. And the truth is that's what the media wants us to think about
mhm,
is I'm a victim, there's this problem and that problem, and that doesn't accomplish anything. All they're doing is freaking us out. So I also suggest, by the way, limit social media, to 15 minutes in the morning, 15
mhm.
minutes in the evening, and then spend most of your time bringing some light into the world. And you'll
Yeah.
find that your soul will be lifted.
Yeah, I love that, and it's funny. I'm gonna use that little snippet as a clip, and I'm just hoping that people will spend that 30 seconds of their 15 minutes of spending of social media time watching that clip right there.
Exactly, exactly. Right.
You had mentioned earlier the seven principles because you in your book you outline seven
What the seven
principles.
principles, you got
Yeah,
it.
yeah. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So the first thing that I encourage people to do, which I do in the book, is identify the best version of yourself. I call it develop
Mm-hmm.
your prototype. So I'll ask people, what are the 5 words you want to be remembered by? What are the things you would do if you had 24 hours to live and why? What's worth fighting for? It's a great story in a book by Alan Patton where there's a soul that goes to God, and God looks at the soul and says, "Where are your wounds?" And the soul turns to God and says, "I have none." And God says to the soul, "Was there nothing in this world worth fighting for? What's worth going outside your comfort zone?" So it's really trying to stretch people to think about what do you really want to be remembered for? What really matters? And then the principles really, again, help people navigate different things. Like, for example, one of the main principles is I talked about Elijah moment, creating memories.
Mm,
How do we, and I do a lot of funerals, I meet with families, and I'm sitting there and I'm saying to them, tell me something about your mother or father. And I'm always inspired by the memories that people share. Because the truth is, we never know the value of a moment until it becomes a memory.
mm,
And a lot of my life is not because of anything that my parents told me, was an experience that still pulsates within me. So in that chapter, I help people identify two things. Share with me some unforgettable memories in your life that still percolate within you. And then we think about how can I create those for my friends, for my family, so that when I walk in a room, I'm thinking about how am I planting new fire in somebody's life, new light in somebody's life. Another principle is called finding faith, which is how do I transcend grief? How do I
mhm,
turn obstacles into opportunity? Many times people get stuck and they don't realize that what happens to us is really what happens through us. And we grow through these things. So that's another important
mhm,
principle. Another one is this one is to me very important, courageous choices.
mhm.
Warren Buffett said it takes 20 years to build a reputation. It takes 5 minutes to destroy a reputation.
Sure does. Sure does.
And, I help cultivate an awareness that every decision that we make is the way that we are fortifying ourselves in terms of who we are and who we wanna be, and part of that is identifying what are the values that are important to us, and I'll give you an example of this. In the, Olympics in Beijing many years ago, on the front page in the New York Times, there was a story about Olympic swimmers, and there's something called the dolphin kick that swimmers are not allowed to do, or they could be disqualified. The problem is that the umpires could not see if people use the dolphin kick within the first few feet off the wall. They just couldn't see it. So they asked swimmers the following question. If you will not be caught, would you do it anyway?
Mm,
So many swimmers said, like, if everybody's doing it, well, I'll do it. But Brendan Hansen, who was a bronze medalist for the United States Olympic team, said, "That's not the way I was brought up. That's not what I do." And to me, when we don't know who we are and what our values are, then all the morally challenging decisions become dependent upon who's the highest bidder. People start compromising. But if we
Mhm.
know who we are, what our values are, then you look at a morally challenging choice and you put it through the prism of what your values are. And this is who I am. And so that's also at the end of the day, when you say at a funeral, he was an honest person, that's great. But that
Mhm.
means in all of his interactions in business, he did the right thing.
Right.
But that takes
Right.
courage to do that, not to cut corners, but to do what's right. So that's another one of the principles.
Yeah. I love the word legacy. I think it's a beautiful word. I think it is scary sometimes though, because I feel like the word legacy, while it is beautiful, sometimes it feels a little distant, right? Like legacy is something only for older people or for successful people to worry about. So how do we bring that idea of legacy down to eye level for people who are just trying to make it through the day every day?
So I would say that, think about legacy really as impact, as
Hmm.
influence. You're right. The word legacy is like, what's his legacy?
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
but at the end of the day, legacy is just it's about influence. It's about impact. And I think that, the way to build one's legacy is literally one little act at a time, one little positive interaction that we have can make a difference in somebody's life.
Hmm.
I'd say an important mindset to think about is the moment that is right in front of you is designed for you to bring something positive to somebody's life. I don't believe any encounter is random. And I've seen that many times, like God oftentimes will put us in a place where he says to us, now here's your chance. I'll give you a case. Uber's great place to
Hmm.
create legacy. Now you might
Yeah.
think Uber's creating legacy. Well, the reality is, we always have these moments where in the back of the Uber and we say to ourselves, do I engage or do I not engage?
Hmm.
Do I connect with the person there or not?
Yeah.
And I've found more often than not that amazing things happen when you just start that conversation. I'll give you an example. I was in Israel. I go often actually, but I was there about a year and a half ago. And it was the day of my daughter's wedding. Thank God we're blessed with 6 daughters. 5 are now married, thank God.
Hmm.
But I was in
And you're a
Israel at the
grandfather, right? You're a grandfather now, right?
I have 11 grandchildren.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah.
You're moving fast. Um, so, um, all of my, daughters and my wife had to go early to the wedding hall to get their hair done. Now, as you can see, I don't have much hair, so I didn't need to go early to the wedding hall. So I was hanging out in Jerusalem. Oh my god. So I was hanging out in Jerusalem, and I need a cab to go back to our apartment. So that's actually an Arab cab driver comes up, and I go in the car, and some of those moments, do you engage or not engage? I said,
Yeah.
"Shalom, like, how are you?" I tried to talk to him, and I said, "Today my daughter's getting married." And it opened up a conversation, and he started to talk about his family and my family. And then about 15 minutes later, we were about to get to my stop, and he said to me, "I was at this apartment about 5 hours ago. I picked up 2 young women and brought them to the Western Wall, and one of them was wearing a white dress." Well, as it turned out, my daughter on the day of her wedding went with her sister to the Western Wall to offer prayers. Now, there are thousands of cabs running around
Yeah.
Jerusalem,
Yeah.
but immediately when that happened, I felt the cab was filled with light because here was a man who brought my daughter to one of the holiest places, and 6 hours later, I was in the same cab with him.
Mhm.
And I think about this. Had I not said hello to him in that cab,
Mhm.
God would say to me at the end of my life, "Do you know that I put you in a cab on the day of your daughter's wedding with the same cab driver who brought your daughter to the whole Western Wall?" And I would say, "God, you didn't tell me that." He said, "But you didn't even say hello.
Mm.
If you would have said
Mhm.
hello, that's all you needed to do. You would have figured it out."
Yeah.
So I think
Yeah.
sometimes for people who are running around and life is busy, just engage, say hello, recognize that a smile goes a long way, and all you need to
Sure.
do is make eye impact, and that's the way legacy is built. It's not this huge thing. It's about leaving the world a better place as often as you can.
Yeah, it sounds like you prioritize impact over achievement. And I feel like our culture today is very obsessed with achievement over impact, right? Am I right to assume that? Like, I feel like people sometimes will all like if somebody were to tell that story that's more focused on achievement, like the first thing that comes to their mind is, okay, what do I get out of it? As opposed to,
Yeah.
how does it affect the people around me in a positive way? And I feel like focusing more on impact than achievement is a good way to go. Uh, I'm also curious. I know that there's a lot of people who didn't grow up religious, who didn't grow up with a spiritual foundation. What's your advice for finding meaning without feeling lost in the language?
So I think that it's important to have a spiritual mentor.
Mm.
I think it's hard if you don't have like kind of a guide. I mean, I do, not that I'm here to push the book. I think the book can help people. There are a lot of good books out there, but I think that, you know, the whole notion of what I'll call spiritual personal development and finding a book that speaks to you, that helps you realize that you can find renewed purpose. That just because yesterday you may have been on a treadmill, that doesn't mean today is not a new opportunity to move forward. And I think that another thing is, I believe very strongly that you change the way you feel inside through the actions that you do that help other people. I
Mhm.
believe your actions affect your emotions. So the more that you do for others, especially those maybe that are not blessed in the same way as you. Somebody told me this many years ago, 30 years ago. They said, they were asking me, I was challenged by a person who had a lot of difficulties in life. And they said to me, Rabbi, I'm losing faith and I'm feeling very depressed. And I called a fellow who was a Holocaust survivor. He's since passed away, and asked him for advice. And he said, have the person have in their house a charity box for a charity that gives money to people that are much less fortunate than even them.
Mhm.
And every day when you put money in there, instead of thinking about what you don't have, it changes your mindset to think about what you do have.
Mhm.
And you begin to have a different sense of how blessed I am. There's always things for us to lament. So I would say, obviously, reading is important, being inspired. I think God, we need to pray to God for help. But I think acting in a way that puts, you know, um, priorities on helping others, it has a way of giving fuel to your soul with renewed purpose and mission that you never could have imagined.
Yeah. What I appreciate about the work that you do is that yes, you're a rabbi, but your work speaks to people of all faiths, even those who have no faith, which I appreciate because that opens the door to a lot of people, and I want people to understand that, and I'm going to include a link to the book in the description of this podcast. So all you have to do is click, so and you'll get more information about it. So I really appreciate the work. The other side of it that I wanna pick your brain about is shame, right? Because we all make mistakes. There's always gonna be a moment in our life where we look back and we're like, "Oh man, why?" But one thing that I'm trying to teach myself is to give myself some grace, in those moments, when mistakes are made. Um, but I know that I feel like I have a good handle on it, but I know there's a lot of people out there that struggle with that. Can you talk about the shame that sometimes people have when they make a mistake and maybe even potentially hurt other people, and how that can, how that plays into the whole conversation about legacy?
Sure. Look, I think that, you know, there are 2 pieces here. If somebody did something wrong to hurt somebody, obviously it's important that we make amends. I mean, that's
Mhm.
not something to just ask, you know, God, please forgive me for the fact that I stole $2,000 from that guy. That doesn't work.
Yeah.
I have to go
Wait,
to the
what?
guy
I'm
and say,
doing it wrong. Oh, man, no.
so when it comes to interpersonal relationships, we gotta confront that. At the same time, I remind people the following. This is also from a work that was written a few hundred years ago. When describing the attributes of God, and that really in the Bible talks about the holiest people are those that walk in the ways of God. What does it mean to walk in the ways of God? It means to be slow to anger. It means to be patient. It means to be a person filled with grace. It means not to be transactional in our relationships, but
Mhm.
to again flood kindness in the world. So I will oftentimes say that, you know, every morning when God decides to wake us up, and I don't think that that's an accident, it's intentional.
Mhm.
God is saying, you know what? Yesterday you made mistakes, but I still believe in you. I still believe in you. I'm not going to dig for the dirt, but I'm going to mine for the gold. I'm going to give you a new diamond today to polish, and I'm going to let yesterday go. So I think that we have to see ourselves the way God sees us. So therefore, even if I may have done something wrong, again, I'm saying interpersonally, you have to deal with it. But even if I made
Mhm.
mistakes, I need to be more forgiving of myself. So you know what? If God believed in me, and I need to believe in myself, and God wants me to improve my life. I'll also say this to people who are unwilling to forgive others. Like if somebody comes to me and says, you know what, I'm really sorry about what I did. I want to make amends. We have to be graceful. We have to be willing to forgive in a case where somebody truly is sincere to also, pass that along. If God's willing to forgive us and we've really done our best to do amends, then for somebody else who again, accepted what they did and they really tried to make amends, we shouldn't be holding the grudges here. We should also kind of allow that grace to flow also.
Yeah. Yeah. I you've worked with so many different people, and I'm sure you've learned personally from your experiences from working with so many people, like you've worked with Allen Houston, a former New York Knick player, David Robinson, former basketball player for the San Antonio Spurs. I'm a basketball fan, so I saw those names. I'm like, oh, I love
Good
those
man.
guys.
Good man. Yeah.
I grew up in that era, so like I appreciate
Yeah.
Allen Houston and David Robinson. But you've worked with people all over. Um, and I'm sure you've learned something during those experiences. You're often in the room with people during their most vulnerable moments. What has that taught you about life?
Um, I would say it definitely, I mean, first of all, I think that, just as when you share somebody's joy, it increases their joy. I've learned the power of walking with people in their grief to diminish their grief. And you don't have to
Mm,
be a rabbi to do that. Like when somebody is walking through the valley of the shadow of death, sometimes we're afraid to be with them and being with them and saying, you know what, I don't have any answers for what happened, but I have seen the power of saying to somebody, I'm here for you. God should give you strength, to listening, to asking about the person. And our presence, I've learned, makes a real difference. Nobody wants to feel they're walking alone. So that's
mhm,
something. The other thing, and many things that I've learned, is also just the power of small moments to really have impact. I mean, again, like when I'm trying to eulogize and working with a family of a person who lived for decades, and they begin to tell me about what are the character traits and the values that really matter. Proverbially, people say, like, nobody wants to write on their tombstone, I spent all this time in the office.
mhm,
They really think about relationships. They think about kindness. They think about honesty. They think about humility. They think about joy and living with grace and gratitude. So I've seen over and over again that at the end of the day, that's what really counts. So I try to counsel people to recognize, what really matters. And you mentioned David Robinson. When I spoke to him, because I'm writing another book called Rising
mhm.
Higher, and I interviewed him for the book. He said to me, like, I didn't make myself 7 foot tall. God gave me that. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying? And
yeah.
he recognized very strongly the following, which is really a challenge for people. I tell people, don't confuse your role with your soul. He
Mhm,
said the key to basketball, he's an all-star, Hall of Famer. When you're on
yeah.
the court, you're the center. And you have to be, you have to have a certain sense of ego. Like you're the guy.
Mhm,
But he said the moment you walk off the court, you're a husband, you're a father, you're a friend. And to me, I've seen that over and over again, that people need to recognize that what they do is not who they are. Is in the final analysis, the job that we have doesn't really define and shape what's most important. It's who we are as a person that ultimately truly matters.
Amen. Amen to that. I mean, you've
Amen.
delivered thousands of eulogies. You've worked with so many people. What do you want your last final line of your eulogy to be?
Oh boy, God willing, it should be for many years, for both of us. One thing I think about is that, I mean, I really feel this, and this is to me like what you're here for. Like he seized God's light and shared it with the world.
Mhm.
I mean, the reality is, if all of us could seize the light of every day and just pass it through to everybody that we meet, our lives will be infinitely more impactful and exponentially greater. That's a short one,
Absolutely.
but that's what I think about.
No, no, I think that that's
How
it's
about
I mean,
you? How about you? What do you think about?
ooh, I oh man, now you got me thinking.
Oh
Yeah, I
boy.
put you on the spot. Now you're gonna put me on the spot. I know. What do I want my lessons to be? Um, that he did everything in his power to make sure that the people around him always had what they need that he was capable of giving.
Mm.
I think that's what
Amen.
I want it to be. Yeah. Yeah, I
That's
just
good. I love it.
and I'll be honest, I wasn't always like that, like this is a fairly recent um epiphany that I've had about my life and the type of man that I want to be moving forward. Because I've had so many things happen in my life, and it wasn't until recently that I'm like, man, I think it'll be like I feel good when the people around me, when I know that I've played a role in making them
Mm.
smile or making them laugh even or helping somebody out. Like that brings me so much joy. And even on my platform, like on my social media platforms, on my podcast, I'll sometimes just get these random messages from people or emails, and people will just say, "Hey, I appreciated, what you said about this, and that, and I just want to say thank you." So, like knowing that, like I have the ability to affect a person in a positive way brings me joy. So that's what I shoot for.
Yeah. Right. Well, that makes your soul sing. So you're doing the right thing.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. Rabbi, I very much appreciate you and your insight. I have one more question for you before we go. I always love to ask this. What's one thing that's giving you joy today?
Being on this podcast with you.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. I love it. I'll take it. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. By the way,
I love it.
you can send me the check later for that. Okay. Anyway,
It's not going to be much. No, it's not going to be
I know.
much, but
I'll tell you one other thing just to share with your audience. I
yeah.
started something. It's an online platform called the Legacy Academy. So
Hmm.
I work with groups of people to help them lead a more intentional life. And again, you can go on my website. I can give you the link for that. But yeah, look, we all are destined for spiritual greatness. God believes each one of us has something unique to contribute, and God willing, we'll be mindful and inspired every day to share the unique light that we have to share it with the world.
Thank you so much for checking out this week's episode of the Vibe with Kai podcast. I truly hope this episode gave you something to think about and maybe even something to act on today. Huge shout out to my guest today, Rabbi Daniel Cohen, for sharing his wisdom, his stories, his heart. If you want to dig deeper into his works, you can grab his books that he's written. One is called What Will They Say About You When You're Gone? And the other is called The Secret of the Light. Or you can visit his official website and get all his information from there. I'll drop all of the links in the show notes, so go check it out if you can. And hey, if this episode moved you, if it made you smile, or if it helped you see your own legacy a little bit more clearly, do me a favor. Like, subscribe, leave a review. No matter where you're watching or where you're listening. Do it for me, please. It helps more people find this show, and it means the world to me. You can also reach out to me on social media at The Vibe with Kai on all major platforms. Reach out to me and tell me, what legacy do you want to leave behind? Thank you so much for watching and for listening. As always, my friends, much love, good vibes. I'll catch you later. Bye.